You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Well, hey there, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Just Japan podcast. It is actually episode 223, and it's fantastic. We've got a returning guest. We've got Riki Ohkanda back on the podcast, a.k.a. PaprikaGirl on Twitter, or X. If you guys don't know who Riki is, you definitely should, because she has one of the best Twitter feeds out there. She's one of the reasons why I stay on the platform. And it's the only platform she is on. She's not on Instagram. She's not anywhere else. She's only on Twitter. And I will continue to call it that. But yeah, so it was really fantastic. I sat down with her last week. We had a really fun conversation, fantastic conversation. I'll say that word a lot, fantastic. We talked about Tokyo in summer. We talk about all of the cool infographics she makes and shares to teach people about life in Japan. We talk about health and fitness. We talk about over-tourism. We talk about a lot of different things, and we could have just continued to talk and talk and talk, but we each had to do things aside from talking for a podcast. But yeah, fantastic talking to her as always. And you guys are going to enjoy this episode, as you always do, of course. So sit back and enjoy my conversation with Riki Ohkanda, a.k.a. PaprikaGirl. We're back with another episode of the Just Japan podcast, and it is awesome to have returning for the second time on the Just Japan podcast. It is PaprikaGirl, Riki Ohkanda. Riki, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Hey, David. It's very nice to see you again. Meet you again.
It's been a while before we started recording. We figured it's been definitely more than a year. Probably a year and some change since we last had a conversation, and that was fantastic. A very, how shall we say, an episode that was much appreciated by listeners, and really? People really enjoyed that. And it's again great to have you on. So, for those who may be, new to the Just Japan podcast, could you just give the folks out there, the listeners, just a little bit about who you are and what you do in Japan?
Well, I am PaprikaGirl on social media. I've been in Japan for a little over 20 years. Originally from America, I'm from Chicago, but I was raised mostly in Europe and various countries. Okay. I came here for college, and that's where I met my husband. He was my one of my classmates, and we graduated with a major in philosophy of science. And after that, I went into the film industry, and even to this day, I'm working as a television director for drama and that sort of thing. Okay, so wow. That's what I'm doing here.
Very cool. And for folks to hear more of that backstory, you can go and listen to the previous episode with PaprikaGirl. And in that episode, we talked a lot about kind of the third culture kid growing up experience. I thought that was very fascinating because my own two children are going through a similar experience now as they are international school kids and living in different countries. So what has been happening with you since the last time we talked? I know obviously you work in the TV industry, but you've had an independent project as well. What's going on there?
Yes, I do have an online drama series, and it's written and made in Japanese, but it is designed to be subtitled. So the name of the drama is ZA Production, Z-A Production. Okay. It is a parody of a film production company in Tokyo. All of the what it is, you have about I have 5 characters in there, which represent various elements of people who work in the film industry in general. They're all working in this one company here, and they have a little bit of an insane boss, but all of the stories are based in reality. So even though the boss is kind of insane and says a few insane things, this is not actually all that uncommon in film industries. We have a lot of very strong personalities and a lot of very interesting bosses. Okay. As friends of mine, we get together, we shared stories. There was this time when my boss boss bought a toaster and then made everyone stop working for a day so that we could design what we're going to eat for the next week on this toaster because, for various, very strange reasons. I don't really think she had any real reasons. But what I decided to do is all of these people who are acting in this show are all friends of mine, and the location as well. It's an actual television production company, which they're just like, oh, you do whatever you want. And so I'm filming the entire thing on iPhone, and I'm just putting it up there whenever I have random time. So this is it's just a fun project. I did it for the sake of everyone, so that anyone can see it for free.
Okay,
it's on YouTube and X and things like that. So
cool. Neato. I love the idea of like those kind of independent web series. We need more people doing that. I can remember years ago there was one based out of. It was really good. It was based out of like Nagoya. There was some English teacher who made a web series, a comedy about like teaching in an eikaiwa. And I made it just a few episodes. I'll have to figure out what that was, but it was really entertaining. But that was maybe like, I want to say 10 or 15 years ago. I guess maybe YouTube wasn't so developed at that point, and maybe people didn't quite consider it a serious platform. Maybe nowadays a lot of people just put things directly to YouTube when they do them.
Yeah.
But yeah, very cool. So, it is summertime. Oh, and I see that you just put out a great infographic on Twitter the other day about how to cope with summer in Japan. So I'm wondering, how is summer in Tokyo treating you so far?
Well, it's actually quite interesting this summer because it's not. Everything's a little bit wonky with the weather, as it is all over the world.
Okay. Yeah.
So it'll get really, really hot for 2 days, and it'll get nice and cool for 2 days, and back and forth, and we'll have rain on and off because it is the rainy season technically. Although I think it's the day after tomorrow is supposed to be the Dai show. So there are 72 micro seasons in Japanese. And even though Japanese love to say shiki because it's a term that comes from China, as you know, the 4 seasons, the balance of 4 seasons, Chinese philosophy. But in fact, Japanese has 72 seasons and they're micro seasons. And the big ones coming up, it's going to be Daisho. And that's written large heat. And so Daisho, when that begins, then officially the rainy season is supposed to be ended. Okay. And that's when it's going to have the real pith of summer is going to begin. And for that sake, we're doing a lot of different things around the house to prepare for it. And this includes putting out these thatched sudare, which are these kind of like a grass curtains around the house so that we keep out the hot and then let in the breeze.
Yeah.
And of course, we're putting all the water elements. So we have all these little fountains and stuff outside in order to. The more water you have in the area, when the breeze comes in, the entire house gets a lot cooler. So we want to try to avoid using too much air conditioning if we can avoid it, and just do the natural thing where just letting the house, let the air run through it properly. It's possible in my area because there's a lot of green.
Okay.
Other areas of Tokyo, which way downtown, just like any large city, you'll have those areas downtown, which are just concrete jungles. You can't do that sort of thing. But we're making our preparations.
We did some of those things when we lived in Kobe, and we were living in a large apartment block, one of the man-made islands in Kobe Harbor, and we would get the afternoon sun beating down on our main windows of our balcony. The main it was a typical, like 3DK apartment with you had a tatami room, kind of a living room that had the main windows that would open. But I remember we had those, what you're saying, those kind of grass thatch, or kind of grass, what is it? Kind of not curtains. Yeah. And we put those out on our balcony, and we had these hooks up above the door, and we'd hang them over to the balcony, and what a difference it made. It really did. And then we could open up those windows, like you said, we could open up the windows and just have the breeze come through, because we were trying to do the same to reduce the use of our air conditioning, because it gets pretty pricey too, and I can remember we'd have the kids. We had like a little. Our water feature was a small inflatable pool for the kids. But I mean, it was wonderful, and it was great. And I see that now that I'm in Malaysia. A lot of people don't have air conditioning, or they don't use, especially people who live in kind of more traditional houses, and they do have the windows and doors open all the time. Maybe they have to contend though with things like giant monitor lizards and cobras and stuff, unlike you in Tokyo. But yeah, so cool. So I actually I copied your I downloaded your graphic that you made, And I put it on the Just Japan Podcast Facebook page earlier today. And I said, this is from PaprikaGirl on Twitter. I didn't try to claim it. And I said, check this all out, folks. Ways to cool down in the summertime. And I thought that was really neat. Because interestingly enough, like you said, with climate change and whatnot, I mean, it's hotter in Tokyo and Osaka than it is here in Malaysia, and which is really neat because I chatted last week with Rochelle Kopp, and she was on the last episode of the Just Japan podcast, all about the issue with trees being cut down across Tokyo and Japan, and how people don't understand what canopy cover is, and we talked about canopy cover and how large trees and old trees create this incredible amount of shade over streets in urban zones where people walk and they get that shade, but actually large trees also cool. There's a cooling effect with like transpiration, and as they release water and stuff into the atmosphere, they actually are natural air conditioners. And that's kind of, it's an interesting episode, guys. If you haven't heard the last episode, go back and listen to the problem Tokyo's having with trees being cut down, and that's not helping with the heat.
I'm over to the west side over here. So I'm in the area called Kichijoji. And Kichijoji, it's right between Mitaka, Musashino, and Nerima. Okay. And this area is famed for parks and trees, and they love their trees over here in West Tokyo. So if they knock down a house or something, what they'll do is they'll put up a park and they'll grow some trees. Because they love it. They actually call their little buses, their Mi buses, and they call Mi buses because Mi is the first letter from Midori, which is green. So little green buses and everything. So there are areas of Tokyo which are, unfortunately, especially downtown, in the downtown areas, they do the same thing in Chicago and other places too, where they'll just all down, urban sprawl. But there are areas of Tokyo which say, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to enjoy our greenery.
That's good. That's good.
More people are thinking in that direction.
I think it really, hopefully, and that's one thing that we want more people to think that way. And I guess it ends up being like a community by community, ward by ward, probably kind of thing, right? It's really if a ward or a community has the passion to do it and make it happen, they can. But yeah. So your Twitter continues to grow in popularity, and you've got a big following, which is something to be proud of. And I see, as I follow you, a certain quality that would attract people who are interested in Japan. I suppose I chatted recently with Matt Alt on an episode 2 about like the kind of boom with going on with Japan right now, Japanese cultures. It's always been popular, but it's kind of going to next level right now. So when I think about like all of the posts that you make these lovely infographics about Japan, about each month, about different aspects. What do you think it is that's attracting so many people to your Twitter feed?
Well, I'm not so sure about how many followers I actually have. I have a strong feeling that a lot of that is bots, because like however many thousands of people are maybe following, if you look at the actual interaction numbers, it's actually like 10% of that. So I'd rather just have 10 people who I know are humans on there than I would have like 12,000 followers, which are just nobodies or nothings. So I really appreciate real humanity there, actually. But I think that right now on social media in general, a lot of people are very, they're looking for the interaction. They're looking for interaction. So they'll post a lot of things which may be relatively inflammatory.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know.
I don't want to say the word clickbait because it's a little bit overused, but they'll put something up there as a hot take, as they like to say these days, which is going to be just the right thing to get enough people riled up so that they'll come in and they'll comment and they'll get really angry and things like that. And there's just so much of that out there on social media, just trying to get you to interact and pull your tail just in the right direction. So I think I'm since my husband and I, we are heavily involved in politics over here in Japan. Oh, okay. So I make a very strong point of not posting anything political if possible.
Yeah.
I'll get my.
I too follow that rule. Yeah.
So no politics.
Yeah.
And there's just so much negativity in the world in general. And one of the things that I was learning growing up from my grandfather and grandmother is that, everyone hears that if you don't have anything nice to say, don't post anything, don't say anything at all, right? Everyone comes up with that. But one of the things that my grandfather instilled in me is that he's like, well, the things that are beautiful, things that are lovely, things that are kind, those are the things we should be filling our minds with. And those are the things that we should be sharing. So if it's not one of those things. I try to avoid posting it in the first place.
Yeah.
But what you were saying, going back to what you were saying about Japan, though, is like there's plenty of people who will post. There's the hot take type people who will post about Japan and say something that they don't like, and then get a lot of people involved in that.
Yeah.
Or there's the other type of people which will post something unattainable, like something about samurai or multi-billion-dollar kimonos, or
Yeah.
about living in a Teian or something like that, which the average person can't access. So when I've realized that I've only been on Twitter for like maybe 2 or 3 years now, but I realized that it's more profitable to post little tiny things like. Today, I will have this kind of onigiri, or I'm using this particular kind of cup, or if you look out the window during this season, you'll see this particular kind of flower or something like that. The reason I post those is because let's say someone's watching that when they're in Canada and they can't go to Japan,
Yeah.
and they would love to, but they're sitting there in front of the computer. Well, what they can do is they can also take their cup and they can also put a sweetie next to it. And they can also look out the window and see what kind of flowers out there. And these are all things that are attainable for the average person. And what I'm trying to say is that I would like it very much if somebody who was all the way over in Canada could also appreciate the season in the same way that people over here in Japan do. Even though it might be a little bit different in their own way, it's something that brings them closer to the culture as opposed to just kind of like talking down to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's some great takeaways there. First of all, I agree about the not. I also have the philosophy of not posting anything that's inflammatory. I don't post things about politics. I do realize that, for example, with me, I realize that so I'm a teacher, I'm a professional teacher, and I do have parents of students who follow me on social media, and so years ago, before we recorded today, Riki and I had a little bit of a conversation. I was telling her some tales of how early on in the days of me on social media, there sometimes would be people who would troll me. So one thing that I learned years ago was to own who I am, what I do, and also that anything I post on social media, I need to put, and I always have in mind that anyone could be looking at this. It could be a future employer, it could be my current employer, it could be the parent of one of my students, and it needs to be okay for all of them to see. And it's okay, So if I make a video, it's going to be, I'm not going to say something that wouldn't ruffle any of those feathers. It's going to be, so nothing controversial, something that it's everyone can see. And I find that what happens when you do that, all of a sudden, a lot of those, unsavory people, they kind of, for the most part, they're gone. Because they don't want to, if they realize there's nothing to engage that in a negative way, and I totally agree with you too about the whole idea of some of the things I'll share about about flowers, for example, in Japan. I suppose because of who I am, I notice certain things. Like one thing I love in Osaka and in Kobe, and maybe the same flowers are also in Tokyo, but there's these beautiful in the summertime, these kind of very delicate reddish orange poppies that are everywhere, in every abandoned lot, on the side of roads, by bus stops, growing into cracks in the road. And where I grew up in Canada, I never saw poppies. And actually, and the fact that they just grow up in all of these really unusual, unexpected, unkept places in Osaka, I always found that really beautiful and magical, and I love to take photos of them. But I'm also a big sustainability nerd, and I love wildflowers. I don't like using the term weeds. I like to use the term wildflowers. Dandelions for me aren't weeds. They're gorgeous, beautiful flowers that bees love them and wasps love them. And so I'll see it sounds really cheesy and cliche, but I see the beauty in that. And I that's the stuff I like to share. And when I see an old, maybe what some people would say is a decrepit house, an old abandoned house somewhere, I find that fascinating and beautiful. I love exploring at night and walking down alleys, and my often most successful posts would have been these pictures of these old Showa era houses that seem to be empty. But for me, it's fascinating. It tells such an interesting story about that neighborhood, and maybe once upon a time how robust and energetic that neighborhood was, but now it's changing. And for me, I look at it and there's a story playing in my mind, and I want to share that story, that's so it's, I see why people are attracted to your Twitter. You do show, I think you also, and I'll ask you some more questions about this. You're showing a more kind of a traditional side of Japan that we don't see a lot of foreign content creators sharing. You know, we see lots of people who share the Pokemon Center. I'm one of them too. Sometimes we see lots of people who are sharing, you know, the kind of more exciting, glitzy, glammy part. But you're sharing something that I got to admit I also don't really know much about. So, you know, traditional. On the last episode, you talked a lot about kimono, and that's you're well known for. You know, but you post a lot about traditional dress, and I've seen like you were posting some photos in the last month or so about jinbei and different types of men's fashion in the summer. So I'm wondering, I'm going to kind of segue over to another kind of little topic, but I want to talk about that traditional fashion. It's summertime. We've already talked about summertime's coming up. So what are some of those more traditional things that people would have worn in Japan and that you do still sometimes see at Matsuri and fireworks and things? Yeah, let's talk summer clothes.
Summer clothes. Okay, well, let's see. The kimono, I have to reiterate this, is for both men and women. So it's not like kimono is for women and like jinbei is whatever it is for men. I mean, kimono just means clothes, right?
Okay. Yep.
So you have a lot of people which will come and be like, well, is kimono just for chicks or something like that? Well, it's not true at all. And I get that so often that I decided a little bit to focus more on the manly side of clothing over here. And that's why I mentioned things like jinbei and also the other one is samue that I talk a lot about. And jinbei and samue, what's nice about them is that they're they look slightly more Western in the sense that they're a pair of tops and shorts, right? So it's recognizable. And similarly, you don't need any special skill to put them on.
Yeah.
A kimono, you don't really either, but there is a little bit element of the ladies fashion, which there is a little like twisty ties and things like that, which do take some time to get used to. So with the jinbei and with a samue, then you don't have any of that. It's just top and pants, right? And the difference between a jinbei and a samue is the jinbei is you just got out of the shower, you got to throw something on, and it's a pair of shorts and top, which is designed for rolling around the house in the summer. So I don't recommend wearing these to work. You don't go to a business meeting wearing a jinbei, but it's really comfortable. And it's wonderful for the weekends. Whereas a samue, it's made out of slightly thicker material.
Okay.
It tends to be worn. It's work clothes. Quite literally written. If the kanji, little squiggles, it's quite literally written work clothes. And you can have samue made out of any material you want. So if you want to make it out of a suit material, you can do that too.
Oh, really?
If you want to have it double layered, you can do that too. This one, which I'm wearing right now, this is actually samue. This is a summer material, which I don't think you can see that. Maybe you can see it if I open the window. Hold on. All right, hold on. What it is there's.
Oh, now I can see. Yeah, it's like translucent almost. So you can, yeah.
So this material itself is a summer material.
Oh, yeah.
That means that you can wear this I wear this during the summer because just like lace, the wind will go right through it, right? So you can do as you wish with a samue, right? During Matsuri and places like that, you'll find a lot of men will wear the jinbei, which is one you just get out of the shower and kind of throw on.
Yeah.
It's not a men versus woman thing. So a woman can wear a jinbei if she wants to too, or a samue if she wants to too. But ladies, we like to dress up. So it's a tendency for us women to wear a yukata instead.
Okay, yeah.
What a yukata it's a kimono in the traditional sense, but it's also one of those, at least historically speaking, one of those I just got out of the shower, throwing it on kind of one layer, tiny cotton sort of a alternative to kimono. So just like a jinbei, you're wearing it just because, to absorb the sweat, to go out there to feel cool, to lay around on the grass and then eat yakitori or whatever it may be, look up at fireworks up above there. It's something which is extremely casual and it's really pretty too as well. So it goes, it's a lot of Instagram kind of happy clothing. But men have the same thing too. You can have the male yukata as well, in whatever fabric you want. There's no delineation as to what fabric you're allowed to have as a male or a female or anything like that. So it's quite very comfortable attire for summer.
Yeah, I think of like when I think of Japan in summer, and some of my best memories are just kind of in the neighborhood that I lived in. There would be so many small festivals in our neighborhood, like little, just almost like divided into micro neighborhoods. Little
Yes, yes.
areas would have all these little festivals, and and we also had, the big Kobe fireworks, and one of the big viewing areas for that was there were two major viewing areas near my house that we would choose to walk to different years or different summers. But I can remember like with Jinbei, things that pop in my mind. I picture old guys, the old timers, the
Yes.
old men would be out in the
Yes.
Jinbeis, like riding around on their bicycles in the daytime, or you'd see them all like sitting on a bench somewhere in the shade, drinking sake or drinking shochu on a Saturday afternoon, or any afternoon, actually, sometimes with some of them. But I also picture like I would wear a gym. I had a couple of jinbei, which I would wear like when we'd have at school. Like I taught at an international school, so when we'd have some kind of like event, Japanese event, I'd pull out the jinbei, and it was my favorite days because it was so comfortable because I didn't have to wear a shirt and tie. But I also think of like the Matsuri when we had those summer festivals. You'd see all the little girls in their little yukatas, and the little girls often wearing jinbeis with like
Oh,
ampanman on them and stuff like that, right? And
that's
then
so
and then you'd see like the young couples dating. So when you'd see like the university age couples dating, that's often when you'd see the man, I would find, wearing like the male yukata, all dressed up with a little bag and maybe wearing geita, coming to see his girl, and they'd kind of like awkwardly meet and be all awkward and stuff. And they'd have their hair all styled, and it was like, oh, that's so cool. It was kind of neat for me to see that side of things. Like remember like, and then watching them try to struggle through the giant fireworks crowds, because we're wearing those clothes when you have tens and tens of thousands of people all jammed together in one spot. But it's
yeah.
very cool. It's very cool to see. And then if you have the chance to, for those out there listening, if you do live anywhere in the world where there are large Japanese expat communities, often you see those summer celebrations. When I lived in Beijing, there was a huge summer matsuri where it was really neat. You'd go to this big park, and they had all the tents and yatai set up, and all the people walking around in jinbei and yukata, and it felt like I was being like a time warp or something, sucked back over to Japan. But there I was in another country. Apparently, they have a huge one in Kuala Lumpur as well, because there's a huge Japanese population there. So here we are on a podcast, and maybe you'll know where I'm going with this next. And recently, you've created something that's totally not a podcast, and I'm just really curious. I've been very entertained by listening on Twitter to PaprikaGirl's Midnight Diner. Tell us more for those who aren't familiar. And listen, everyone. You know what? Like, if you're like, I don't use Twitter, and I'm calling it Twitter. Okay, everyone. That's all I'm calling it Twitter. I am calling it Twitter. I still call it Twitter, and that's all. If you're not on Twitter, I would suggest, and you like Japan stuff, get on Twitter just to follow Paprika Girl. What is Paprika Girl's Midnight Diner?
I'm not entirely sure myself. I think it was Summit to Sea is a lovely podcast that they have about Japan.
Yeah.
What it is, it's a gentleman's a nightly diary. Really, it's what it is. It doesn't have anything in particular informative per se, not like your podcast, which have like all sorts of interesting guests and you have all these wonderful topics. But this gentleman here, he lives way up north in Ishikawa.
Yeah.
Well, it's east, but it's north to me. So, and what it is a lovely man who comes back from work, and then he'll sit down with the beer, and then he put his baby to bed, and then the wife's in the other room or doing whatever she is, and he just rambles on in his
Yes.
podcast, and it's remarkable. I love it because
The poetry, the tales, the stories. Yeah.
he's such a wonderful person. It's like you feel like you're there drinking with him,
Yeah.
as it's going on. And so there was this one day, I don't know what was the reason why I decided to do this, but I have a sound recorder here over in my house somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think there was this one day I came back from drinking with so one of my very best friends here in Japan is actually my dance teacher, and she's she's maybe about 15 years older than me, but we're just like sisters, really. She's just like me, only the Japanese version of me. And we click so very well, so that when we drink, we'll go off on a tangent. We'll talk about all sorts of things, like from dance and of course kabuki and traditional art and traditional painting. It's what we really love. And one of those days I was drinking out with, I call her Mama, but I was drinking with Mama, and I come back home and I listen to Summer to Sea,
Mhm.
and I had a bottle there, and I just pressed record on the equipment that I had on the table,
Yeah.
and it was a very good. It was quite lovely.
Yeah.
For just to have the rain there and everything. I was quite drunk, and there was no purpose to it at all. But I just tried to recap the day the same way that I would have listened to someone to see doing it.
Yep.
And I don't know how to do podcasts, right? So I tried to sign up with Apple Podcasts, and they wanted all this sort of information. It got really complicated, and I'm like, this is a pain. I'm not going to continue to do this anyway. So I just stick it into a video instead, because I'm a video person, and just put it up online just to see, just because.
Yeah.
And since then, I did two more, and they're always the same in the sense that they're always when I'm just slightly tipsy, because I wouldn't do it if I wasn't.
Nice.
And they're all, and it's very random. So I don't plan to do any of these things. I don't have a script.
Yeah.
I don't have a purpose to any of them. But it's only after the fact that I realized what I was rambling about. I think I've only done 3 until now. I think I plan to do I hope to do one more actually with Mr. Summit to Sea eventually.
Mr. Joseph Fowler.
Yes.
Yeah, he was on episode. Yeah, he was on episode 220. Of this podcast. I just interviewed him recently for the, and he had put out a call to me. The way that happened was he was someone who was on my list of people I want to talk to and interview. And then there was just like on one episode of Ishikawa Summit to Sea, he's just like, he said like this gentleman who's now in Malaysia was a far superior podcast to mine. He was like, maybe one day he might invite me to be on his hint.
Remember that? I totally remember that one.
It's kind of like, oh my God. And I DM'd him the next day. I was out for a walk and I was like listening and I was just laughing like hysterically as I'm walking down the road alone. And I just messaged him like, yes, come on, please. I want to talk to you. And then like 2 days later, I interviewed him. But it's, I a few things. I love that diary style podcast. And actually, I started initially doing that when I'd put out the Just Asia podcast. It was me just talking about things. But then I somehow morphed it into kind of this podcast here, the Just Japan podcast, was on this like 4-year hiatus, 5-year hiatus. This podcast was out from 2013 until about 2019-20, and then I just stopped making the Just Japan podcast. I lost my mojo when I left Japan. But what I realized, and so many people were saying to me, like, hey, Kevin, like, I know you've got this Just Asia podcast thing happening, which is a similar style, but, a lot of people want you to bring back Just Japan. So I did, and what I realized was, there were still a lot of people who had not unsubscribed from the feed, and when I put up the first episode in years, within like 24 hours, I had 600 or 700 downloads. And I was just like,
cool.
Wow, that's insane. Like, I don't get that on any other podcast, not even like close to that. But it's interesting that kind of diary style. Like I loved, of course, Casey Bean with the Bean Pod. Of course, I loved Ishikawa Summit to Sea. And what you're doing is fantastic. So if you do ever want to put it into a podcast form, I can help you out with that. And I can teach you the way. It's not as hard as you think. We can get that out there. Maybe. I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but maybe we can talk about it sometime. If you do want to do that, I can help you. And there's free ways to do it. Yeah. That didn't always be that wasn't always the case. Or used to, once upon a time when we did this, you had to pay out the nose to do it. But yeah. So wow, that's so yes. I definitely do enjoy listening to Paprika Girl's Midnight Diner. When I see it pop up, I'm like, ooh, this is nice. So I don't want to keep you too long, but there's a few more things I want to chat about. Because you're always doing so many things. I sent you this list of talking points, one thing you've been sharing a bit on your social media, and I've kind of compartmentalized this into making I made a specific Instagram about this, about my own fitness journey. I'm someone who is, for me, because I know you've been talking about going to the gym, so I'm just a little bit curious about, what's up with that? Because you've been mentioning you and your husband have started going to the gym. I'm very interested in this because I myself have become obsessive about exercising. I was very not like that a couple of years ago. I was a sit at home and drink beer all the time kind of person. And just not very active. And now I can't imagine going back to what I was like because I'm such an active human now. It's become my routine. And I suppose that's kind of the ideal goal for people when they do start fitness. It's kind of like, you get up in the morning, you eat breakfast. For me, it's like going to the gym is just like that. It's just it's just something I do. So yeah, what's been happening with this new membership and stuff?
Well, I wanted to get healthy for like years now. It's one of those things you put on your bucket list every January. You go like, well, this year is the year that I'm going to lose 20 pounds and I'm going to be super thin and look like I did when I was 22. But, things, it never really worked out because, I get busy. And then, in my industry, once you start filming, you're filming for 3 months and then nonstop. And then you have a hiatus where you're planning for the next project. And that's what you go through this cycle. So those monthly memberships were never any good for me. But then I don't know what the precise thing was, but it was my husband and I we're both getting there, slightly older these days. And we both have a little bit of a gut. And I
know this all very well from my own personal experience.
I have a feeling that you and I did the same thing. We must have done the same thing at the same time in our age.
I didn't have a little gut. Oh God, no. My students, I teach early primary, and just like it was relentless with the children poking and touching and saying things like, Mr. O'Shea. I always remember I had this one student who said to me, she came up and she hugged me and said, Mr. O'Shea, I love you so much because you have the biggest tummy at our school. I was just like, oh my God. And she looked up and she's like a 7-year-old girl with honest, like, love in her eyes. And I'm just like, I want to shoot myself right now.
Oh no, that's great.
And I would yell at you right now, but I realize that actually you're meaning this as a compliment and you're honest. And oh my God, I hate this honesty.
Yeah, you cannot deny children. They know.
Yeah. I love you because you have the biggest tummy at our school. It's just like, oh.
Thing though.
Thank you.
We both went through the same sort of, we don't have children here, and we don't teach children, but we do have the same sort of mentality of like, hey, you've got a big tummy too. And we used to laugh about it as we grew older, but it was just something clicked about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And husband's like, what he did is he's like, well, let's research what are the best personal trainers in the area, because, figure that's the way to go. And if we did something, we'd have to do it together because otherwise, we'll fall off the bandwagon quite quickly, So husband decided on all these other things, and he was doing all this research because he takes a lot of time to do tons of research on everything before making any step. And I got irritated. So I went to the local gym, which I knew Tipness was right there. And Tipness it's a chain of gyms over here in Tokyo, and it's quite expensive actually. If you want to,
I think gyms in general in Japan are quite expensive. They're pretty cost prohibitive for some people, I think. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do it, you're going to have to go all in or nothing because it's really, it's going to be your thing. And I just got irritated, and I looked on the webpage, and they have this 2-month free sort of a promotion which was going on for the summer, and I just jumped right in. I'm like, this is it. I'm just going to go. And I went without husband first. He got quite irritated that I did that, but he was taking too long to make his decision. And so I took him and I explained to him, this is the situation, and you're either coming with me or you're not. And he's like, all right, fine. And so he came the next day, and he signed up too. He didn't like the price, but he realized that if you're going to start any of these things, we'd have to do it together, and we have to put enough effort into it so that we have something to say for it. And of course, we have these 2 months trial period. We decided, well, how much weight can we, not just weight, of course, but you have to, it's balance between the muscles and, the fat and other things, but how much progress can we make within the 2-month period? And if we make enough progress, which to consider it something that's economically feasible for the family, then we will continue it. And So that's what's motivating us to begin. Husband's much more busy than I am these days because he has to leave the house and do all these things at work. But because of this huge investment, and because both of us are doing it at the same time, and also because he has to lose it's difficult to gauge these things, but he has to lose slightly less weight than I do.
Okay.
I'm going every day. So whether he's there or not, then I'm going to go. I'm going to go, and I'm going to, do my aerobics and all sorts of weight training, and I'm going to use the personal trainer because he's there.
Cool. Yeah.
And make sure that I make progress so that I can make it into a routine the way that you have it. So you are now in a routine, aren't you?
Yeah. Like it's what I do. It's I can't get through the day. Like I'm obsessive about it in a way. And like I've I'm kind of an odd person in so many ways, and my friends will always attest to that. But I mean, like I need motivations, like once upon a time when I was in my 30s, I used to run marathons in Japan. I ran Kobe Marathon, Osaka Marathon, Tokyo Marathon, a whole bunch of times. I ended up busting up my knees, and then it's interesting how this happens, right? Like, I don't know if you think about your youth, think about the friends you may have had who are jocks or athletes, the people who are, and by the time they're 40, they're just wrecks, like physical wrecks. A lot of them, like when I think of like the kids I know who played like hockey extremely seriously. Well, by the time they were like in their 40s, they had like bad knees, bad shoulders, bad elbows because of that, rough sport. So for me, I recently got into, and sometimes I post about it on Twitter, but I got into, of all things, arm wrestling. I joined it. Talk about niche. I joined it. I don't know. Like I fell down a rabbit hole one night on YouTube and found this like Canadian, like arm wrestling champion named Devin Larratt, who was from the same part of Canada as I'm from. He just had such an incredible story and personality and charisma. He's got like more than 1 million followers on YouTube, and he's just amazing. And he said, and I was like, this seems like, and I saw some videos about like the fitness that's involved and the training, and I'm like, this is an interesting thing. And he said that if you want to learn how to arm wrestle, join a club, because if not, you'll break your arm. People who mess around, you'll break an arm. You'll literally break an arm if you don't know how to do this. So if you join a club, you'll meet people who will teach you how to do it safely and properly. So I got online, I did a bit of searching. I found an arm wrestling club here in Penang, Malaysia. That's on the other side of the island. And I asked my son, and I also want to find things to do with my son who just turned 14, kind of like manly type things, father-son things. But I do want to find kind of like manly stuff. I don't know why. I just have this urge. So we went, I don't know. It's like a machismo thing. So I'm like, do you want to do this? And he was like, huh? He was like, do you want to arm wrestle? Like that's what all my friends do at school. I'm like, do you want to learn how to arm wrestle? We can maybe kick all their butts, And we joined this club, and it was so much fun, and it was neat. It was really neat. But also I think what I found is a really cool experience for me was, when you're an expat living in different countries, a lot of times you've amalgamated, you are integrated within the Japanese community. You have Japanese friends, you work at a Japanese company, you do this. But a lot of expats don't do that. They move to Tokyo, they work for a foreign company, and they only hang out with other foreigners. And they go to yoga classes with foreigners. They go to the gym with other foreigners. They're always with, and they don't really integrate, right? They don't learn the language. They don't learn the culture very much. Yeah. And that's very common. And I'm guilty of that in many places I've lived in China. But I said, I don't want to do that here. I want to meet local people. And we joined this club, and it's all this amazing group of guys who I normally never would have met. They're all Malaysian. I'm the only two foreigners in the club are my son and I. And they're construction workers, they're laborers, they're lawyers, they're office workers. They all come from such amazing different backgrounds. And we get together on the weekend, and we'll spend an entire afternoon together. Like they call it sparring, arm wrestling, talking, laughing, having a great time. And I've learned so much about Malaysia. I've learned so much, like, Penang is a melting pot. It's an Indian culture. Indian, Chinese, and Malay cultures are all mixed in together. So there's all these different guys. I'm just... It's neat. Like, and I can say, like, I'm acquiring local friends. I'm learning about the community. I'm learning so much. And they kick my butt, and we work out. And then what it gives me is I know that the next week they're like, Kevin, you need to work on this. Your wrist isn't strong here. You need to do these exercises. And then I work out at the gym like crazy for the next week, coming back. And then I feel so happy when they say, oh, we actually feel you're stronger now. You're a bit stronger, Kevin. Keep training hard. And then so now I have this like goal, and that's why it's an odd niche sport, but it's really motivating me to just, when I'm not doing that, I'm at the gym, just training really hard So
There's something I have to mention here is that one of the things that when they're talking about the expat trap of people who come to another country and they say, well, I don't have any local friends, they'll complain about it. It's going to lead to depression as well too, because you'll feel isolated if you're not part of the integrated into the country that which you've chosen, right? But it was just the other day I mentioned this to somebody, and he was blown away by it. But what was important, and this thing over here in Japan and as well, is you have realized is the concept of shumi. So in Japanese, the word shumi means it's a hobby. Right. Yeah. But it's not the same as the English shumi. Doesn't have the same nuance as hobby. So hobby is, scrapbooking, or, you like, what do? I like sailing, whatever it might be. I don't know what people do in hobbies, but in Japan, what it is it's the identity beyond work. Right. Mm-hmm. And this is your community. So for example, in my world, I would say one of my hobbies would be tea. Right. And so the tea ceremony would be not just the studying of the tea itself, but it's also the community, which is part of this, surrounded around this. Yeah. So if you go to a tea ceremony, you go there and you see other people's faces and you get to know the familiar faces. And then you're invited to the next tea ceremony, and you go to the tea ceremony and you go and get drunk with everyone else, and you have a wonderful time. And your circle spreads based on the hobby that you choose here, wherever it may be. So if you're in Malaysia, or if you're in Japan, or if you're in Hungary, which is one of the places I grew up, and I started to learn about the expat phenomenon, it's that if you're not involved in a shumi, which is a local sort of a circle or a club, it's very hard to go out there and just make random friends. Yeah. But if you're part of one of these clubs, then it's infinite. You can go on and meet all these wonderful people from all these different backgrounds and that world in ways which you would have never done so if you started with your little expat community and just going to the bar. Yeah. That's what you were talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, shumi. And that's, I think I've learned this now kind of later in life, and I've been living expat life for a long time, but like this has been such a great thing for me. So when I do move on in the future, I'm going to jump into something very much like this, to meet those local friends. And it's just, and again, I mean, I'm an international school teacher. How often would I have a chance to meet like laborers or construction workers? You know what I mean? And then these are the guys I arm wrestle against. I'm like, oh my God, you're so bloody strong. How are you so bloody strong? You're smaller than me. And they're just like, well, what do you do for a job? I'm like, oh, I'm a teacher. And they're like, yeah. Well, one guy was like, I'm a construction worker. He's like, I pick up like these like 40 kilo like rocks all day long, and I move them back and forth. Of course, I'm stronger than you. And you're like, yeah. But
that would make sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I write with a whiteboard marker on a whiteboard. And I make copies at the copy machine. That's why my wrists aren't strong. But it's again, topic jumping and expats. Speaking of expats and tourists and foreigners come to Japan, I won't keep you much longer. But I do want to touch on this because you posted something recently on your Twitter. You had put out some decorations about the Gion Matsuri, to kind of celebrate the Gion Matsuri, which is the big summer Matsuri in Kyoto. And you said you can't go this year. And then you did mention the term over tourism, which is a hot button topic amongst expats in Japan. But it is something that is very fascinating because it seems like no matter what facet of whatever Japan I'm listening to, if I'm listening to, if I'm reading stuff about Akiya, abandoned houses, and I'm talking about controversy about people setting up Airbnbs in different places and locals not liking that, and the need for accommodations and local people not liking that accommodations popping up here or there. I see a lot of people kind of countering this over tourism argument, saying, well, look at this, all these places have no people. Where you are in Tokyo, are you seeing this over tourism? Or should I be using air quotes when I say over tourism?
It's like you said, it's a hot button topic, but I don't mean to ruffle any feathers or step on any toes whatsoever, of course. But over here in Kichijoji, which is my area, Kichijoji is actually a little bit of a tourist town because this is the area where the Ghibli Museum is located.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Fans will come out here, right? And even before the whole cool Japan sort of a thing, it was always a beautiful area to come and relax because we have a lovely park here, and we have a lake, a small lake. There's boats and paddle boats and things like that. We have zoos and we have aquariums. We have all sorts of things for people who come from Saitama and other nearby Tokyo areas that all come to Kichijoji because it's young, it's vibrant. There's music festivals and all sorts of things going on here all the time. Okay. And the weekends have always been, for the last 24 years I've been here. So the weekends have always been a little bit lively.
Oh,
So
okay.
that locals, they don't go out on the weekends. It's all tourists over there. But there has been a large increase in tourists after once the pandemic kind of died down and the borders were opened up again. The issue which we're having with over tourism isn't the amount of people that we're having, though. It's the problem with manners. So you're going to have all sorts, just like you're on Twitter and any other social media. All sorts are participating. Not everyone is. I don't want to say well bred, but not everyone is has been brought up nicely by grandma, right?
Yeah.
So
Nice way to put it.
in a way. And there is also very aggressive. I don't want to say that this is a more aggressive generation than it was before, but there is a tendency for people to be a little bit aggressive and a little bit self-assertive when they go into a new country, because they're afraid and they're nervous and they're looking around and they have all these assumptions. They're trying to make sense of the world. And I think that in areas like Kyoto and other places which there's been an influx of tourists, it's not the overpopulation, it's not the number of people who are coming, but it's simply the bad manners that they're protesting, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I don't want to discourage people from coming to Japan. I want people to come and I want them to enjoy it, but I want the people who come to Japan to be the type who can enjoy it. And the type who will step back for a moment and recognize that this is not their own country. They don't do things the way they do in their own country. And just like a visitor or someone even who's emigrated to another country, you're going to have to be aware that the rules and the I don't know, the manners are going to be different. It's sort of thing. And so I don't know. It's like all the issues that I see on the news of people complaining about the tourists and this and that. If you go and look and dig into what's in there, it's all just a matter of manners. I keep on going back to that, right?
It's kind of like the same thing people in like Venice are complaining about, or the people who are in different parts of Greece are complaining about, or the people here in Malaysia. I live in a tourist area of Penang. I live in a place called Batu Ferringhi, which is a big beach area, and when I go to a local restaurant, and then I talk to the owners and they realize, and I say, oh, I live here actually, like I work up at the school and I live in that apartment building. They're like, oh, you work here. Oh, you live here. Then they kind of open up and kind of, sometimes they'll complain to me, and it's the same kind of complaints about visitors that,
it's the same. Yeah.
it's like someone carving their name into the Parthenon, right? Or someone carving their name into like, a temple in Nara, right? Like that happened. It was a Canadian who did that too. A Canadian teenager who did that last year, I remember his name was Julian because he carved it in. Everyone could see. Julian. But I mean, it was just like, those bad manners are the things that really stick, right? And we, my own family, like we have certain stories of bad behavior we've seen with tourists and other places we visited that we just never forget. It's like, remember years ago when we saw that? Remember the years ago when we saw that? And like my kids remember, we kind of laugh and share that story, but it was, something that infuriated me at the time. But yeah, respect, I guess, is the key, huh? That's...
Yeah. There's a wonderful term in Japanese, it's the hanmen kyoshi. And hanmen kyoshi means to look at someone who's behaving badly and to use it as a teacher, as an example of what not to do. And when every once in a while people are not self-aware, they don't know that they're doing something wrong, right? So in their own culture, it would have been perfectly acceptable to do whatever it is that they're doing. Yeah. But when you see some sort of bad behavior, whether it be a local or whether it be a tourist, you look at that and you realize, look at that person, he's talking so loud on his phone on the train. Look at that, that's awful. But then you remember that later on as you grow older and you're like, well, made me feel awful to see that. And therefore, when I go out in public, I should be very careful how I use my cell phone, or be very careful not to lean on the temple wall in a strange way and leave a print or something like that. And it's important to not just complain about others, but to be aware that some of the things that are causing other people trouble are also things that you too would have complained about if you were a local. So it's just something to keep in mind, I suppose.
Yeah.
To us, I suppose.
It's all good to lead by example, and through platforms like this, through a podcast or through your Twitter or through different things, we can educate people and share more information just with people about this is how you should behave, and these are expectations, or these are the kind of things that will make people feel uncomfortable. I think there are content creators who do a good job of that. I'm a fan of, I've always been a big fan of the Abroad in Japan YouTube channel. He's got a great sense of humor. He's really funny, but he does do a lot of videos where he is really teaching people about how to behave or how you should not behave when you visit places in Japan. And often when we were new expats to places, we learn the hard way because we make those mistakes and then we're corrected. And then we learn, oh, shouldn't have done that. And then, I know that's how it was for me often. I did all those things. Well, not all those things. I didn't carve my name into temples and stuff like that. But no, but it's you realize I shouldn't have stuck my chopsticks in that bowl like that, or and these are things I learned when I first moved to Korea or Japan and different places. Well, okay, well, cool. It's moving on. It's lunchtime where you are. I don't want to keep you any longer, Riki. So all folks out there, get on Twitter, follow at PaprikaGirl. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us this week.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Thank you so much, Riki, for taking the time to stop by the Just Japan podcast and have a conversation with me. That was fantastic. And of course, all of you out there, if you are on X, Twitter, you definitely need to go and check out PaprikaGirl. It's go search for, I'm having trouble talking right now. The link will be in the show notes, but at PaprikaGirl_JP, at PaprikaGirl_JP. And you know what? If you are a Japan fan, but you're not on X, and I understand why you're not, especially after that guy bought it. But if you're not on X, start up an account simply to follow her because it's well worth it. If you're a Japan fan, you will like her content. It's very cool. It's very unique, which is why she has more than 14,000 followers. That's a cool thing. All right. Now, as for me, I've been very busy this week. I have another podcast called the Nature Talks podcast, the environmental education podcast. It is very professional, very work related. I'm an elementary school teacher, but I'm also an environmental educator, a trained environmental educator. I studied at Queen's University. So that's one of the things I do. So I'm very passionate about that. So I have the smaller podcast. I've got 25 episodes out. And it's more for teachers and connecting educators around the world with sustainability and inspiring people to take climate action and inspiring schools to become more sustainable and to kind of lead. So I created a new YouTube channel for that podcast, and I put all the episodes up on that YouTube channel. So the link will be below. If that tickles your fancy, go check it out. The Nature Talks podcast, hosted by yours truly, Kevin O'Shea. So I've been really busy doing that all week. Let's see what else. Went shopping yesterday. Went into Georgetown. I live in the boonies in the Inaka of Penang Island here in Malaysia. So went into the big city. One thing I got, my wife put me onto this. I bought Jamie Oliver. Remember him back in the day, the Naked Chef? Jamie Oliver, very accomplished chef, cookbook writer, TV personality, does really cool things. I like Jamie Oliver, but he's written a couple of children's novels, and I bought his first one called Billy and the Giant Adventure, a hidden world, a magical secret, a journey they'll never forget. It's totally awesome. It's a book that's really geared towards 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, and I'm going to read this. I just got it yesterday. I'm going to start reading it today over a coffee, and hopefully my daughter will read it after that. I think my wife wants to read it. I'm looking forward to that. It should be a lot of fun. These are the books that are right down my alley. Now, of course, I am a primary school teacher, so it's good when you're a primary school teacher to be kind of on the up and up about children's literature, and maybe as a primary school teacher, I don't have the vocabulary I once did, so I need to read those books too. So that's that. Tomorrow, Saturday, the 27th, there will be the big Penang Bon Odori Festival here in Penang, Malaysia, which is the Japanese summer dance festival, put on by the Big Japan Association. And it'll be right downtown in Georgetown, right by the jetties, the historical jetties in Penang. They'll be blocking off the Esplanade, big street, and there will be the festival. I've never been to it. It's my first year here. So very, very excited to see that. I will share a lot of that on my social media, of course. And if you're not following me on the social medias to find out all that stuff, what are you doing, guys? First of all, go to Facebook, join the Just Japan Podcast Facebook page, which is facebook.com/justjapanstuff. Link in the show notes. follow me on X, on Twitter, at MadForMaple, and check out my Instagram. I'll probably put these photos, some on Jland Kev and some on Japan Night Scenes. So go follow me in all those places, and you'll see I'm pretty active everywhere around there. So yeah, that's really what I've been up to. And August is quickly approaching. So I'm slurping on a cup of delicious coffee. I'm recording this segment very early in the morning. August is coming. I will start work near the end of August. It's summertime, but I'm gearing up. Back in the job hunt, back in the job cycle if you're an international school teacher. If you're looking work for the following school year, so teaching positions that start in 2025, actually you start interviewing and hunting for jobs like August, September, October 2024. Things work really early. So we do plan on moving out of Malaysia after this year. Where we will be, I can't tell you because I don't know. Will we be back in Japan? Probably not at this point. With the current packages that are offered to international school teachers, they're not very good, to be honest. As well as the strength of the yen, it just financially doesn't make a lot of sense for us to make the move right now. I will probably be moving back once my son is in university, to be honest, or son and daughter in university. That's when that will happen. And a lot of exciting things will happen then. A lot of exciting things will happen. But a lot of exciting things will be happening between now and then as well. So that's it for me, guys. A little bit update about what's going on with me. I'm having trouble talking. My voice is really weird. Sorry, maybe it's an early morning thing. I'm not used to talking so much early in the morning. Sorry for clearing the throat. Well, that's it for episode 223 of the Just Japan podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please help us grow. We were on a hiatus for several years. So there are a lot of you listening. There's no doubt about that. There's a lot of you listening, but there could be more. And you can help us grow by posting. If you are, someone who is a fan of Japan stuff and you're involved in any Japan Facebook groups, please share links to the podcast. That'll help us a lot. Please leave a review, leave a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon Music, wherever you listen to us. Go check out my YouTube channel at Busan Kevin. Go check that out. I still post stuff there from time to time. And go check that out. Follow me on Twitter, of course, at MadForMaple, on Instagram, at JlandKev, and at Japan Night Scenes. And, of course, join the Facebook group, or the Facebook page, I should say. All the links are below. all cool places to be. I hope you're doing well wherever you are in the world, everyone. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a pleasure having you listen to me and my conversation with Riki Ohkanda. All right, guys, that's it. Take care, and I'll be talking to you again really soon.